First thing I want to show on this car is a problem with a lot of Mercury Cougars, Ford Mustangs, Granadas, Torinos, you name it. Anything with one of these old floor shifters, they use the same basic setup from, well, the early 60s until the late 70s. These are not that hard to rebuild. So with a few little inexpensive parts that I've laid out here on the dash, I'm going to show you how to make this like brand new. Do not disregard this video. Do not hold it off till later. This is a very serious thing. I have sold a lot of parts to people whose cars have jumped out of gear because the detents weren't holding on this. So here we go. So like anything else, while you're at it, why not beautify this area? This is obviously kind of an ugly setup here. It's just worn. And convertibles get a lot more UV damage than hardtops. This is, I just picked this out of my used stock. It's not perfect, but this is what it looked like before. And this console piece gets even more UV damage than this. And the previous owners of this finally just took it off and threw it away because, like I say, it was uglier than this. And if you're lucky, you'll find a low mile coupe one, but in the end, that's kind of faded out too. And we have reproductions, but lately it's been hard to source this almost correct wood grain. So what do you do if you can't find good used and the reproduction is not even quite right and hard to come by? Well, you can always go to the reproduction straight grain. This is a nasty old used one, but we, of course, for the standard models and Mustangs have the dark walnut straight grain. But here's another suggestion. I worked with the suppliers of these console parts, and he came up with one that doesn't take any wood grain. And I know that's not original for a Cougar. The only model I believe this ever really came from the factory on was your base 6970 Mustangs. But let's talk about the 1970 Eliminator. The 1970 Eliminator had no wood grain in the car, unless you ordered a console. Then you got one little piece of straight grain here. Well, that kind of looks out of kilter to me. I'd rather on a 70 Eliminator just see pebble grain to match my dash. So enough said. These are beautiful. They're excellent fit. Notice, you know, how perfect the chrome is here, and the chrome is always missing around where your belts go in and out. So let's, before you even start this project, go to our website and buy your bushings, your diffuser, your blockout, your seal, and maybe one of these. Okay, even on a clean, well-kept car, debris finds its way down here. And to get this unit out, you're gonna have to expose these screws. But if you look at this inner one here, you can't even, no Phillips is gonna bite into that. So get your little pick tool, and let's try to get as much garbage out of there as possible before we ever touch it with a screwdriver bit. Now notice how I'm lifting up on this. That's because you got some little metal tabs there. And when this goes back in, make sure you get them lined up or you'll have problems. So, looks like we have some other unintended maintenance down here. Wow, look at that. Little homemade soldering job and some really interesting electrical tape there. Well, that's got to be addressed before this goes back together. This shift handle is much better than most. They all have to crack somewhere. If you're lucky, your shift handle will crack back here and nobody will see it. This one cracked right here. I personally, for a driver like this, I'm okay with a crack like that. But know that our reproductions are very good quality and you can upgrade the leather. This piece has been in a garage kept car, so a little steel wool, and this is going to clean right up. I'm not going to worry about this crystal here. That looks good. We are, however, going to change this seal over here. And it looks like somebody used some bicycle inner tube and made a college effort at it. Let's go see what we got. Okay, these seals do not come with directions. Most people think that's ready to put on, but this rubber is really sticky. And under just the right exact circumstances, the shift lever can grip so hard to this that it stretches the rubber or rips it. So let's get a little lubrication on this. Okay, some people might think it's easier to service it in the car. You can get under the car, undo the shifter. I think it's just easier to take the shifter out. So now you got to expose the fasteners right there, 4 of them. They're 3/8. Okay, right away, I can tell this is going to be hard to get this out and back in. So being a console car, I'm going to do some relief cuts here. Okay, before you start just pulling this plug through the tranny tunnel, notice there's a nail head right here. We're going to try to reuse this little plastic loom holder. Okay, I'll just pull it off the nail head. Here is your loom holder for your neutral safety switch. We'll just put that right here and hopefully we can put it back on the nail head. Okay, here we go. We've exposed the 9/16 bolt where all the looseness is. Let's go get a socket. Okay, usually this little blue thing is completely missing, and always is the black shield missing. And the original black shields, which go over your stem and saddle that part, the original black shields were made of the same plastic, but we did these out of aluminum so they don't go bad. A lot of people claim these never even came on the car because they've never seen it. Well, believe me, they lasted the first 3,000 or 4,000 miles of the car before they crumbled. Okay, being as I'm just going to replace this neutral safety switch, I've decided to remove it from the car and not try to service the shifter in the car. And a lot of times that's the way that you go. You think you're going to take a shortcut and not take it all apart, but then you do the while you're at it stuff and Maybe a guy should just always plan on doing it the long way. Forget about the shortcuts. Okay, let's inspect the shifter housing before we go put it back in, making sure that none of the stanchions are stripped for the chrome shift bezel. Of most importance though, we want to look really close at these detents and make sure none of the corners are chipped or worn down from excessive use while having wore out bushings. But I think they all are within tolerances. And you want to see this riveted in place well. And we also want to make sure that this is not scarred, chipped, or in terrible shape. Otherwise the bushings won't last as long. So the good news is the replacement bushings are much better than the little white plastic originals, I feel anyway. And this is likely the last time this car will ever have to go through this procedure. And whereas I don't think the factory put any white lithium grease on there, I like to dab a little white lithium grease on there. Okay, let's make sure this is nice and clean. Here's another bushing you'll want to inspect for wear. Okay, this looks good here. I prefer a nice used original over a reproduction. Although the reproductions really aren't too bad for this particular setup. Okay, let's put this together loosely here and make sure our release lever is where it should be before we go any further. We got to be careful not to get this too tight. Okay. Next, we're going to have to get a tiny little screwdriver to get in there. Okay, since this is not plastic and it's aluminum, that's exactly the same size as the shifter here, there can't be any debris on this shifter. It has to be polished smooth or it will hang up on the slightest amount of surface rust. So let's get this all cleaned up with 4/0 steel wool. And everybody that's into old cars should always have a package of 4/0 steel wool right there. You'd be amazed how many times you grabbed for it. Yeah, you will fight that if you have any debris on there. Okay, there is a nice little finish piece that you didn't even know you're missing. So now, when you shift, you won't see inside, you won't get debris in there as easily, coins won't slip in there. It's a nice little block-off plate. sure that black piece is not cracked. It goes nicely into that square opening. There is what it looks like when properly assembled. Let's go put it back in the car. Okay, I'm actually going to stop right here and not do the final screws. I actually have to replace this console base here. As you can see, it's got a big chunk out of it here. So I'll do that tomorrow, but just wanted to show you how nice it is to have a tight shifter and everything clean, and my light's going to illuminate properly now. Shouldn't have to touch this for another 50 years. Thanks for watching.